Happy Thursday. Welcome to April 16th, 2020. It's the Thursday after Easter, and so we're moving towards our first Sunday after Easter. And the days are just ticking by, aren't they, right? One day after the other. And some people, if you're like me, sometimes you wake up and you're not really sure what day it is because one day might kind of look like the other, right? We've lost track of our normal our normal way of life, right, is one of the things that everybody's talking about right now, and all the things that we usually tracked our time with. And we find ourselves in this weird situation where it feels like we have all the time in the world, and that we're not even sure what to do with it. You know, we get the things done that we have to get done, but then the things that we would normally do to fill our times, like going out, going places, meeting with friends, doing this, that, or the other thing, all the things that, kind of burn up a day that we wouldn't even realize we did, suddenly they're gone and we don't know what to do with the time. Maybe you're at a point where the novelty of Netflix, right, has worn off. I say Netflix in general, just, filling your life with streaming video, binge watching whatever you're going to binge watch. Now it just can almost feel burdensome. You're like, I just can't watch another hour of whatever or waste another day, doing this. And you find yourselves at the end of the day where, you felt like you had all the time in the world and now you're not sure where the time went. So we kind of find ourselves maybe at the question now, how do you make the most of this time? What do you do with it? That brings me to the text for today, which is Colossians 4:2-5. And our daily Bible readings for today were actually Psalm 16, and then the Song of Solomon, which is chapter 2, verses 8-15, and then, of course, Colossians 4:2-5. Paul is writing to the Colossians. He's writing to people that were basically waiting on God. Paul and the rest of the Christians at the time that he was alive and that he was ministering really were waiting on Jesus to return. They were waiting on God to act, waiting on Jesus to return. They believed that Jesus had died and been crucified, had died and been resurrected, and that he had returned to the right hand of God the Father Almighty, from whence he would come to judge the quick and the dead. And they were waiting on that coming to judge the quick and the dead part. And so the question for them was, well, what do we do till then? Because they had an expectation that it was going to happen pretty immediately or fairly soon, but they just didn't know when. And so the question was, well, what do we do with our time? Well, that's a good question. What do we do with the time we've been given? Now, this guy John Wesley that you hear us talk about, and at the beginning of the video, if you're from outside of the Methodist tradition, the Wesleyan tradition, you may not be familiar with the name, but John Wesley was an 18th century priest in the Church of England that worked to reform the church. He was very concerned with the way things were and how they were not in keeping with what the testimony of faith was, what the revelation of Scripture was. And so he was very focused on using his time wisely and making the most out of time to get the most done for the sake of Christ. And so he was very concerned with how we wait on God. And he would have been right in keeping with what Paul is saying to the Colossians of how to wait on the Lord. So, and actually Wesley would have called these the means of grace, but what Paul says to the people is that they should first devote themselves in prayer, that they should keep alert in prayer with thanksgiving. And he goes on to say, at the same time, pray for us, that is, the apostles, as well, that God will open to us a door for the word, that we may declare the mystery of Christ, for which I am in prison, because Paul was imprisoned at this moment in his life for having proclaimed the gospel of Christ, so that I may reveal it clearly, as I should. And then he says to them that they should conduct themselves wisely towards outsiders, making the most of the time. And when he says outsiders, he means people outside the faith, people that don't understand or have not heard the gospel of Christ, and that the people that he's talking to, the Colossians, should be very concerned about how they conduct themselves towards them, so that those people get a testimony and that they actually might want to follow Christ rather than flee from Christ because his followers and his believers are just so nasty. So think about that next time you're online, by the way. So anyway, it's this idea of, use the time wisely, conduct yourselves wisely towards outsiders, making the most of the time. And there's that question again. How do we make the most of this time? Like I said, we feel like we have all the time in the world, but we really don't. And Wesley knew this. Like I said, Wesley had a long life. He lived a very long time, good long life for somebody in the 18th century. But he still had this understanding that we really don't have as much time as we think we do. That we're really kind of, as I think he says in his sermon on eternity, talks about how we're really just kind of stuck in this little fragment of thing that's like extracted from eternity. We don't have eternity, we have time right now, and that might be short. So Wesley knew that time was precious, and we can't get this gift back. If you look in his journal, he talks about let's see, I've got it here. If you look in his journal, there's from 1758, April 1758, by the way. He has an entry for the 13th. And then what's really funny to me is he has this one from the 21st. Now, Wesley spent a lot of time caring for the poor and making sure that people who were outside the faith had an opportunity to hear the faith, or people that normally weren't cared for by the church got cared for. And he didn't really spend a lot of time with the very wealthy. And he has this interesting little entry here from Friday the 21st of April, 1758. He says, I dined at Lady, and he leaves it blank, right? Doesn't give us a name. But Lady so-and-so's, and he says, we need great grace to converse with great people, from which, therefore, unless in some rare instances, I am glad to be excused. And then he puts in a Latin phrase, which means the moments fly away and all are computed in grand account. He says, of these 2 hours, I can give no good account. Wesley, had to spend time with these people who, at this time in his life, he was well known. And so the people who had wealth and means, they liked to be around the people who were well known. And so Wesley, I guess, was kind of beholden to go to dinner with these people, but he felt at the end of the evening that he could not get those 2 hours back. And like I said, the Latin he gives, which I will spare you and not try to read the Latin, but he says, the moments fly away and all are computed in the grand account. And that was another part of Wesley's thinking, is that we've been given this gift of time. We need to make the most of this time, and that we'll have to give account for this time. So, here we are, and we've got all this time in the world that we feel like we've been given. And how do we redeem it? How do we make the most of it? Besides Netflix, how do we live up to Paul's encouragement to the Colossians? What do we do? How do we conduct ourselves wisely towards outsiders to make the most of this time? Wesley gives us some tips on redeeming the time. I think the first of all, if he's actually got a whole sermon on redeeming the time, which you should look up. You can read it online for free. But first of all, it's simple, easy to get out of bed. Don't spend more time in bed than you have to. And that is a hard time right now and that's the other thing I see a lot of is people talking about, I have no sense of time, and all of a sudden I wake up and half the day's gone. I don't even realize I've slept that long. And then part of that is too, because people, once again, with, the whole streaming video and everything else, we're staying up much later than we normally do because there's no big challenge. We don't have anywhere to be in the morning. So we find ourselves, and so we kind of sleep through the most of the day. So Wesley's first advice is get out of bed. Don't sleep more than you have to. Set an alarm, for Pete's sake. But then he also, this is the practical thing. He says, organize your days around moments. This is me paraphrasing, but organize your days around moments set aside for, as he would put it, holiness. And that same journal entry from 1758 for April, on the 13th, he says, I explained at large the nature and manner of entering into a covenant with God and desired that all who were proposed to do so to set Friday apart for solemn fasting and prayer. Many did so and met both at 5 in the morning and at noon and in the evening. And so, he's saying, don't let one day just roll into the next. Don't let the one day look like another. Organize your life around, as he also calls it, the means of grace, which are things like prayer, things like fasting, and set aside special times and make those times special. Right now in the church, I think we kind of slump towards Sunday and we wait for the live stream to start. But the whole week is the Lord's, and we can set aside times to do special things. I know one of the things that for me has paid the price is I usually try to read in the morning and read a chapter of the Old Testament and a chapter from Psalm and a chapter from the New Testament every day, and that has fallen by the wayside because my routine has been shot out of the water. So that's something I need to get back to. Find the means of grace. Use the means of grace, the way in which we approach, taking advantage of the ways that God has put in our lives so that we can experience his grace, and organize your life around them. There's all kinds of ways to do that. I'm not going to go into that, but, Google John Wesley's means of grace. Anyway, but, it's about making the most of the opportunity you've been given. We've had a lot of things, extraneous things, I think, taken off our shoulders, and we can make the most of this opportunity we've been given. So get up, get out of bed, redeem the time. See you later. Boop.